John Mercer lived alone at the edge of the human colony on Kepra 9. His cabin stood far from the other homes, near the broken mining road where old machines slept under snow. Most people did not like that side of the colony. It was too dark, too quiet, and too close to the frozen hills. But John liked the silence. Or at least he had learned how to live with it. That night, the storm was worse than usual. Cold wind hit the metal walls again and again. The loose roof panel made a sharp sound every few seconds. Inside, the small heater worked hard, but the room still felt cold. John sat near the table, fixing a damaged power cell under a weak yellow light. He did not speak. There was no one to speak to. Then the lights flickered. John looked up. A second later, someone knocked on the door. He froze. It was not a normal knock. It was slow. Heavy. 3 times. Knock. 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 John put the tool down. Nobody came to his cabin at this hour. Nobody came here at all unless something was wrong. He stood up slowly and looked toward the old pulse rifle hanging near the door. His hand stopped just short of it. The knock came again. This time it was weaker. John moved closer. The storm outside screamed through the cracks in the walls. For one short second he thought maybe the wind was playing tricks on him. Then he heard something else. A child crying. His face changed at once. John unlocked the door and pulled it open. Cold air rushed inside like a knife. Standing in the snow was a tall alien woman wrapped in a torn dark cloak. Her pale blue skin shined under the red emergency light above the door. Snow covered her hair and shoulders. She looked tired, hurt, and close to falling. In her arms, she held a small child sleeping against her chest. Another child stood beside her, shaking from the cold, with wide golden eyes full of fear. John stared. He had seen aliens before, traders, workers, guards, but never one standing at his door in the middle of the night with children. The woman looked at him as if she had no time left. Black blood ran down her side and dropped into the snow. Then she spoke in broken but clear human words. "I will warm your bed, human, if you let us stay. My children need a father." John said nothing. The words hit him like a shot. The older child moved in front of the smaller one, trying to protect them both. He was only a boy, but his eyes were hard, angry, ready. The woman swayed where she stood. John finally found his voice. "Who did this to you?" She looked back into the storm. Her breathing grew quick. "I have no time," she said softly. "They are coming." John stepped outside just enough to see past her. At first there was only snow and darkness. Then he saw them. Far away, moving through the white storm, small red lights cut through the night. Not one light. Several. Vehicles. Coming fast. John looked at the wounded widow, then at the children, then at the lights again. If he let them in, trouble would enter his home. If he closed the door, they would die in the snow. The woman's knees began to give way. John grabbed her before she fell. "Inside," he said, and the moment he pulled them into the cabin, he knew his quiet life was over. The door sealed shut behind them, and for 1 second, the storm stayed outside. Inside the cabin, the air was still cold, but it felt warm compared to the killing wind. John moved fast. He pulled a thick blanket from his bed and wrapped it around the alien woman's shoulders. Then he took another one and gave it to the 2 children. The smaller child, the girl, held the blanket with shaking hands. She looked half asleep, her face pale and tired. The older boy did not thank him. He only stared at John with narrow golden eyes, like a guard dog watching a stranger. John noticed that at once. The boy was afraid, but he was also ready to fight. The alien woman almost fell near the table. John caught her arm and helped her sit down in the metal chair. Black blood had soaked through the side of her torn clothing. The wound looked deep. John opened an old medical box and placed it on the table. "This will hurt," he said. "It already does," the woman answered. Her voice was soft, but there was something strong inside it. Not pride alone. Something older. Something heavier. John cleaned the wound carefully. The black blood was thick and strange, but a wound was still a wound. He had seen enough injuries in his life to know this one was serious. The little girl climbed onto a chair and watched with sleepy eyes. The boy stayed close to his mother, one hand hidden under the blanket. John noticed that too. "What is in your hand?" John asked. The boy did not answer. The mother looked down and slowly touched his arm. "Eris," she said. "Show him." The boy opened his hand. A small silver blade rested in his palm. John almost laughed, but he did not. The boy was not playing. He was ready to use it. "He was going to stab me?" John asked. "If needed," the woman said. John looked at the boy again. "Good. That means he is smart." For the first time, Eris looked unsure. John finished wrapping the wound. "You need rest," he said. The woman lifted her head. "Rest is dangerous. Bleeding to death is worse." For a moment she said nothing. Then she looked at him fully, as if trying to understand what kind of man he was. "My name is Valera," she said at last. "These are my children, Eris and Luma." John gave a small nod. "John Mercer?" Luma looked up at him. "Human John?" He almost smiled. "Yes." She leaned closer to her mother. "He does not look strong." Eris gave a quiet nod. "Too thin?" John let out a breath through his nose. "Good. I feel better already." Valera almost smiled too, but the fear returned to her face very quickly. She looked toward the door. John followed her eyes. "Who is coming?" Valera was silent for 2 long seconds. Then she spoke in a lower voice. "Men who were sent to erase my family." The room felt smaller after those words. John stood still. Valera continued. "My husband was a commander among my people. He died 3 weeks ago. After his death, they came for his bloodline, for his children." John looked at the boy, at the girl, then back at her. "Why?" Valera's eyes darkened. "Because one of them has a right that powerful people fear." Before John could ask more, a sharp sound broke the room. His outside comm unit came to life with a burst of static. Then a cold voice spoke through the speaker. "Human, we know she is inside." Luma gasped. Eris gripped his tiny blade. John turned slowly toward the wall speaker, his face turning hard. The voice came again. "Open the door and you may live." John glanced at Valera, then at the frightened children. His quiet cabin no longer felt like a home. It felt like the first wall in a coming war. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The voice from the outside speaker had changed the air inside the cabin. It no longer felt like a shelter. It felt like a trap with thin metal walls. John stepped toward the comm panel and switched the speaker off. Silence returned, but it was not safe silence. It was the kind that came before violence. Luma pressed herself against her mother's side. Eris moved in front of them again, the tiny silver blade still in his hand. His face was pale, but his eyes were sharp. John looked at the boy and understood something important. Eris was scared. He was just refusing to act like it. John walked to the narrow window and lifted the metal cover by 1/2 inch. Snow rushed across the glass in white waves. Beyond it, faint shapes moved in the storm. Dark figures, low vehicles, red lights cutting through the night. Not colony guards. These people had come for blood. "How many?" Valera asked quietly. John watched the snow. "Too many for one cabin." Valera closed her eyes for one short moment, not in fear, in thought. Then she stood up. John turned fast. "You can barely stand." "I can still fight." Black blood had already soaked through the fresh bandage. But there was no weakness in her voice now. She looked taller somehow, as if pain had reminded her who she really was. She reached into her torn cloak and pulled out a thin metal object the size of a finger. John frowned. "What is that?" "A pulse shard." "Useful?" "If aimed well." John gave a small nod. "Good. Then we are not dead yet." He moved quickly around the room. The heater went off first, then the main lamp. The cabin sank into dim red emergency light. He opened a floor hatch near the back wall. "Children," he said, pointing down. "Under there. Stay quiet." Eris did not move. "I do not hide." John stepped closer and lowered his voice. "This is not hiding. This is surviving. Big difference." The boy looked ready to argue. Then Valera spoke in her own language, soft but firm. Eris obeyed. He helped Luma climb down first, then dropped below the floor. John closed the hatch, leaving a small air gap. The cabin shook. Something heavy had hit the outer wall. A second later, a voice called from outside, louder this time. "Human, this is your final warning." John looked at Valera. "Do your people always speak like bad actors?" She did not understand the joke, but she understood his tone. "You mock danger?" "I annoy it first." That almost made her smile. Then the front window exploded inward. John dropped low as glass and ice flew across the room. A bright pulse shot burned through the table behind him. The hunters were done waiting. John grabbed his old pulse rifle from the wall and fired once through the broken window slit. A dark shape fell into the snow. Valera moved with surprising speed. She rolled behind the stove, raised the pulse shard, and sent a thin line of blue light through the doorway, just as two armored figures charged in. One screamed. The other kept coming. John fired again, but the man slammed into him before the shot landed. They crashed into the wall. The rifle flew from John's hands. The attacker was bigger, wearing cold armor with no clan sign, only black plates and a mirrored visor. A hired killer. The man drove a blade down. John caught his wrist with both hands. The blade stopped an inch above his throat. Then a small shape appeared from nowhere. Eris. The boy had come out from under the floor. With a cry full of fear and fury, he drove his tiny silver knife into the attacker's exposed neck seal. The man jerked back. John threw him off and slammed his head against the metal wall until he stopped moving. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Then John looked at Eris, breathing hard. "I told you to stay hidden." Eris stared back, chest rising and falling fast. "You were losing." Outside, more boots crushed the snow. More shadows gathered at the door. And then, through the broken window, John saw a symbol glowing on one hunter's chest plate. Valera saw it too. Her face lost all color. Because that symbol did not belong to mercenaries. It belonged to her dead husband. For a moment, the battle outside did not matter. The storm still screamed. The broken window still let in snow. More enemies still moved around the cabin. But Valera could only look at the glowing symbol on the hunter's chest. Her lips parted. "No," she whispered. John turned to her. "You know that mark?" Valera stepped closer to the broken window, her face pale and still. The blue light from outside touched her eyes, and for the first time since she came to John's door, she looked truly shaken. "That is his war sign," she said. "My husband's private mark." John looked again. The hunter had fallen near the outer wall, half covered by snow, but the symbol on his armor still shined faintly. It was shaped like a sharp silver crescent, with 3 small stars cut through the middle. Simple, cold, royal. "He is dead," Valera said, more to herself than to John. "I saw his ashes. I heard the mourning words. I stood before the sacred fire." Another shot hit the side of the cabin. The wall jumped. Dust fell from the ceiling. John grabbed his rifle and checked the charge. Low. "Then somebody wants you to believe he is still part of this," he said. Valera did not answer. She moved to the dead attacker on the floor and dropped to one knee. With quick hands, she searched his armor, belt, and chest plate. Eris stood close beside her now, no longer hiding, his small face hard and focused. Luma stayed under the floor hatch, silent except for her small frightened breaths. Valera pulled a flat black data chip from inside the attacker's armor. John noticed her fingers shaking. "What is it?" he asked. She held it tightly. "Command storage." "Can you read it?" "Yes." Another heavy ooter hit the front door. The lock groaned. John looked at the door, then at the weak walls, then back at Valera. "Read fast." She pressed the chip against a thin silver ring on her wrist. A small stream of light rose into the air between them. Broken symbols flashed first. Then lines of translated trade text appeared. Eris stared up at it. John watched her face. At first, Valera looked confused, then angry, then afraid. "What?" John asked. Her voice came out low. "This team was not sent to capture us." John almost laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "I already guessed that." She looked at him with dark, hollow eyes. "No, you do not understand. The order says no bodies must be returned. No names must be recorded. No witness must remain. Even the children." The room went still. John felt something cold move through his chest, colder than the storm outside. Luma made a tiny sound under the floor. Eris slowly turned toward the door, gripping his knife so hard his little hand shook. John's jaw tightened. "Then nobody opens that door." Valera read further. Her breathing changed again. "There is more." A blast struck the window frame. Metal bent inward. One more hit like that and the whole front side would open. John stepped closer. "Say it." Valera looked up from the data stream. "The order chain begins with my husband's mark, but the final approval comes from the high houses." John frowned. "Meaning?" She swallowed hard. "Meaning this is bigger than family revenge. Bigger than one dead commander. This is politics, blood power, succession." Another message blinked alive across the small light display. A voice file. Damaged, fragmented, short. Valera froze. Her hands almost let the chip fall. John saw it in her eyes before the sound even began. She knew the voice. Static filled the cabin. Broken noise. A hiss. Then a male voice pushed through the damage, weak and rushed. "Valera, if this reaches you, listen carefully." Valera covered her mouth. Eris looked up, confused. "Father?" The voice crackled again. "They are inside the house, not outside. Do not trust the council. Do not let them take the children." Then the file cut out. Silence. No one moved. Valera's eyes filled, but no tears fell. Her face looked carved from ice. John stared at the empty light in the air. So the dead commander had spoken, and he had died warning them. Then a red beam slid across the cabin wall from outside. John rushed to the side window and looked out. More vehicles had arrived, but these were larger, blacker, military. His face went hard at once. "What now?" Valera asked. John looked back at her. "The first group was hunting you," he said. He watched armed figures step from the new transports. These ones came to erase the hunt. They left the cabin before dawn, but the sky was still black. The storm had become quieter, and that made it worse. Now every sound could be heard, every step, every breath, every piece of ice breaking under a boot. John led the way through an old service tunnel behind the cabin. Years ago, miners had used it to move supplies under the frozen ground. Now it was half dead, half buried, and forgotten by most of the colony. That was exactly why John trusted it. A weak handlamp shook in his grip as he walked first. Behind him came Eris, watching every dark corner. Valera followed with Luma in her arms, though the younger child kept asking to walk on her own. The tunnel smelled of rust, dust, and cold stone. Above them, war moved across the snow. Behind them, John's cabin was gone. He had looked back only once. Flames had climbed through the broken roof, and black smoke had mixed with the white storm. Everything he owned had stayed there. He did not say a word about it. After an hour, the group stopped near an old generator room. The metal walls were cracked and dead wires hung like vines from the ceiling. But it was hidden, and for now, hidden was enough. Luma was asleep before Valera even sat down. Eris did not rest. He stood near the tunnel entrance with his small knife in hand, his back straight, trying very hard to look older than he was. John sat on an empty fuel crate and opened a ration pack. He broke the bar into 3 parts and held one toward Eris. The boy looked at it, then at John. "I can feed myself." John nodded. "Good. Then take it yourself. Eris hesitated, then stepped closer and took the food. He did not say thanks, but he ate it. That was enough. Valira watched this in silence. Her face looked tired, but there was something else there too, something softer than before. You lost your home because of us, she said. John leaned back against the wall. It was a cabin. It was your life. He looked at the floor for a second. No. My life was gone long before tonight. Valira did not speak. Neither did Eris. The tunnel seemed to listen. John gave a small, dry smile, though there was no joy in it. Border attack. Years ago. Wrong place, wrong day. After that, I stopped building anything that could be taken. Luma, half asleep in her mother's arms, opened one eye. That is sad. John looked at her and almost laughed. Yeah, it is. Valira lowered her eyes. Then why help us? John answered without thinking. Because your daughter was crying in the snow. The word stayed in the room. Simple. Honest. Too honest. Valira looked down at Luma, then at Eris, then back at John. For the first time, she did not look at him like a stranger she needed. She looked at him like a man she was trying to understand. Our people say grief changes the shape of the heart, she said quietly. Some hearts break, some become cruel, some become empty. John looked up. Valira's voice became softer, and some become dangerous to anyone who hunts the weak. Before he could answer, Eris moved fast to the tunnel mouth and dropped low. John stood at once. What is it? The boy raised one hand for silence. All of them listened. At first, there was nothing. Then it came. A deep metal sound. Not boots. Not voices. A machine. John killed the lamp. Darkness filled the room. A beam of white searchlight slid across the far end of the tunnel. Then a low, mechanical voice echoed through the passage. Thermal traces detected. 4 life forms ahead. Eris turned, his face hard. They found us. John lifted his rifle. Valira stood, holding Luma close with one arm and her pulse shard with the other. The searchlight grew brighter. And then, from the dark beyond it, something stepped into view. Not a soldier. Not a hunter. A tall black combat drone with the mark of the high houses burning on its chest. The combat drone entered the generator room like a machine that already knew who would die first. Its body was tall and narrow, built from black metal plates that moved without sound. A single red eye burned in the center of its head. Thin arms unfolded from its sides, and each arm carried a weapon built for clean killing, not war. John had seen military drones before, but not like this. This one did not hurry. That made it worse. It was sure of itself. Luma buried her face in Valira's shoulder. Eris stepped forward again, even now, even against a machine 3 times his size. John moved in front of them both and raised his rifle. The drone's voice came out flat and cold. Targets confirmed. Widow, male heir, female child, human witness. John's finger tightened on the trigger. Then the machine added, lethal order approved. John fired first. The shot hit the drone's shoulder and threw sparks across the tunnel. It staggered back 1 step, but only 1. Then it returned fire. A pulse blast struck the wall beside John's head and melted a line through the metal. He dropped low and pulled Eris down with him just as another shot burned over them. Move, John shouted. He grabbed an old fuel canister and kicked it toward the center of the room. Valira understood at once. She fired her pulse shard. The blue beam struck the canister. The room exploded with light. Flame rushed outward. Heat slammed into the walls. The drone vanished behind smoke and sparks. For 1 second, John thought that had ended it. Then a metal hand punched through the fire. The drone walked out burning. Parts of its chest were black with damage and one arm hung lower than before, but it was still coming. Eris whispered, "Why is it still alive?" John answered, "Because rich people build stubborn toys." The drone aimed again. Before it could shoot, Luma suddenly slipped from Valera's arms, ran to the dead generator console and slapped both hands against a row of broken switches. Nothing happened. Then everything happened. A deep power surge rolled through the room. Old reserve cells buried under the floor woke up with a scream of energy. Loose wires spat blue fire. The metal grid under the drone's feet flashed bright. The machine froze. Its body jerked once, twice, then locked in place as electricity climbed over its armor. John did not waste the moment. He ran forward, grabbed a long steel maintenance rod from the floor, and drove it with both hands straight through the drone's red eye. The machine let out a terrible sound, half alarm, half animal. Then it fell. Hard. The room went quiet except for the hiss of burning wires. John stood over the dead drone, breathing hard. Smoke rose around him. His hands shook, though he tried not to show it. Luma looked very pleased with herself. "I helped," she said. John turned and stared at her. "You did." Eris looked at his little sister, then at John, then at the ruined machine. Something changed in his face. A wall had cracked. Not all the way, but enough. Valera pulled Luma back into her arms and looked at John with open shock. "You fought a death machine with a metal stick." John picked up his rifle from the floor. The stick had good timing. But then he noticed something on the drone's chest panel. A blinking light. Fast. Warning red. His face changed at once. "Back!" he shouted. Too late. The drone's chest split open with a sharp mechanical click. Inside was not a power core. It was a signal beacon, a location transmitter. John smashed it with the steel rod, but the light had already turned green. Valera understood first. "It sent our position." John nodded once. "Yes," he said. "And now they won't send one drone." Far above them, from somewhere beyond the frozen tunnel, a low, heavy sound began to shake the metal walls. Engines. Large ones. Coming closer. Eris looked up, his voice small for the first time in many minutes. "What now?" John looked toward the dark tunnel ahead. His eyes had gone hard again. "Now," he said. "The real hunters arrive." The sound of the engines above the tunnel did not pass. It stopped. That was how John knew the real danger had arrived. Dust fell from the ceiling. Old bolts shook in the metal walls. Somewhere far above, heavy landing gear touched frozen ground. Not one ship, more than one. John stood still for a moment, listening. Then he turned to Valera and the children. "We move now." No one argued. The tunnel ahead led deeper into the old mining zone, where maps became unreliable and even colony workers did not go. That was where John planned to take them. Not because it was safe, because it was hard to follow. He led them through narrow passages, broken ladders, and half-flooded corridors where old machines slept under ice. The air grew colder. The lights were gone now. Only John's hand lamp and Valera's pulse shard gave them enough light to see. Luma was awake, but quiet. Even she understood that fear had become too big for words. Eris stayed close to John now, not because he trusted him fully, but because John kept choosing the right direction without slowing down. After 20 minutes, they reached an old cargo platform built over a deep mining shaft. Rusted rails ran across the darkness. Broken lift chains hung from above. A dead transport cart sat at the edge like a forgotten coffin. John stopped. "This is where we hold them." Valera looked around at the empty platform. "Hold them? Against how many?" John looked at the old rails, the hanging chains, the cracked support beams. "Enough." He set the rifle down and moved fast. His hands worked like memory had taken control. He tore open an access panel, pulled out live wire, rerouted a charge cell, then climbed under the cart to force power into the old brake lock. Eris watched every move. "What are you doing?" the boy asked. John did not look up. "Making the floor angry." Valera almost smiled despite everything. Then the first sound came from the tunnel behind them. Boots, many of them. John handed Valera the rifle. "When I say, Shoot the chain above the cart. She took it at once. And you? I'll give them a reason to stand in the wrong place. The soldiers appeared a few seconds later. Black armor, full helmets, perfect formation. Not hunters this time. Not hired killers, house troops. Official. Cold. Clean. Their leader stepped forward and removed his helmet. He was Sarathi, old and sharp-faced with silver marks at his temples. His eyes went to Valera first, then to the children, then to John. So, he said softly, this is the human. John stepped in front of the family. The old Sarathi gave a dry smile. Do you know what stands behind that widow human? Blood claims, fleet rights, noble succession. This is not your kind of war. John's voice stayed calm. You came with soldiers to kill children. Looks simple enough to me. The old man's smile disappeared. He raised one hand. The troops lifted their weapons. John shouted, Now! Valera fired. The hanging chain snapped. The cargo cart dropped, smashed the rail lock, and tore forward across the platform. At the same moment, John slammed the live wire into the control panel he had opened. Sparks burst like blue fire. The rail system screamed awake. The whole platform shook. Then the old support beams gave way. Half the floor collapsed under the soldiers. Men fell into darkness. Weapons fired wildly. Metal snapped. The old Sarathi leader lost his footing and grabbed a broken rail, hanging above the shaft. John walked to the edge and looked down at him. The leader stared up, breathing hard. You think this ends anything? John looked at Valera, at Eris, at little Luma in her arms. Then he looked back down. No, John said. It starts something. He brought his boot down on the man's fingers. The leader vanished into the dark. Silence followed. Heavy, deep, final. Eris stared at John as if seeing him clearly for the first time. Valera stepped closer, her eyes full of something stronger than fear now. Respect. Outside beyond the mine, the first light of morning began to touch the frozen world. And for the first time since she knocked on his door, the alien widow no longer looked like someone begging to survive. She looked like someone who had found hope.